Jai Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Pavan Janardan Maharaj Ki Jai.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatha Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatambitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaktam Vitam Cha Om Ajnanatimrandasya Yanajana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Gurva Bhishtam Supurakam Garganara Sisha Sambhushitam Chintya Chintya Samasta Vedanipanam Shri Rupa Patanagam Govinda Vidam Ujwalam Varatanum Bhaktyan Vidam Sundaram Vande Vishwa Gurun Shah Divyat Bhagavat Prem Noi Bija Pradam Devam Divyatanum Suchandavanam Balarka Chelanchitam Sandrananda Puram Sadekavaranam Vairagya Vidyambudim Sri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakti Lasitam Saraswatanam Baram Bandetam Shubharam Madeka Sharanam Nyashishvara Shridharam Manchakopatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahabaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratavishe Nama. So we're reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. This is translation and commentary by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupad. And this is chapter 1, entitled The Spiritual Masters. This is text number 51. Jnanam paramaguyam me yad vijnana samanvitam sa rahasyam tad angam cha grahana gaditam maya. Please hear attentively what I shall speak to you, for transcendental knowledge about me is not only scientific, but also full of mysteries. Transcendental knowledge of Sri Krishna is deeper than the impersonal knowledge of Brahman, for it includes knowledge of not only his form and personality, but also everything else related to him. There is nothing in existence not related to Sri Krishna. In a sense, there is nothing but Sri Krishna, and yet nothing is Sri Krishna save and except his primeval personality. This knowledge constitutes a complete transcendental science, and Vishnu wanted to give Brahmaji full knowledge about that science. The mystery of this knowledge culminates in personal attachment to the Lord, with the resulting effect of detachment from anything non-Krishna. There are 9 alternative transcendental means of attaining this stage: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshiping, praying, assisting, fraternizing with the Lord, and sacrificing everything for him. These are different parts of the same devotional service, which is full of transcendental mystery. The Lord said to Brahma that since he was pleased with him, by his grace the mystery was being revealed. Okay. Yavanaham yata bhava yadrupa gunakarmaka tataiva tattva vijnanam astu te mad anugrahat. By my causeless mercy be enlightened in truth about my personality, manifestations, qualities, and pastimes. The transcendental personal forms of the Lord are a mystery, and the symptoms of these forms, which are absolutely different from anything made of mundane elements, are also mysterious. The innumerable forms of the Lord, such as Sham Sundar, Narayan, Rama, and Gaurasundar, the colors of these forms, white, red, yellow, cloud-like Shama, and others, his qualities as the responsive personality of Godhead to pure devotees, and his impersonal Brahman to dry speculators. Then 16 dry speculators, his uncommon activities like lifting Govardhan Hill, marrying more than 16,000 queens at Dwarka, and entering the rasa dance with the damsels of Vraja, expanding himself in as many forms as there were damsels in the dance. These and innumerable other uncommon acts and attributes are all mysteries, one aspect of which is presented in the scientific knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, which is read and adored all over the world by all classes of scholars, with as many interpretations as there are empiric philosophers. The truth of these mysteries was revealed to Brahma by the descending process without the help of the ascending one. The Lord's mercy descends to a devotee like Brahma, Vyasadeva, like Brahma, and through Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyasa, from Vyasadeva to Sukadeva, and so on, in the bona fide chain of disciplic succession. We cannot discover the mysteries of the Lord by our mundane endeavors. They are only revealed by his grace to the proper devotees. These mysteries are gradually disclosed to the various grades of devotees in proportion to the gradual development of their service attitude. In other words, impersonalists who depend upon the strength of their poor fund of knowledge and morbid speculative habits, without submission to the service of the Lord, without submission and service in the forms of hearing, chanting, and the others mentioned above, cannot penetrate to the mysterious region of transcendence where the Supreme Lord is a transcendental person free from all tinges of the material elements. Discovering the mystery of the Lord eliminates the impersonal feature realized by common spiritualists who are merely trying to enter the spiritual region from the mundane platform. Okay. Aham evasam evagre nanyad yat sarasat param paschadaham yad etatscha yo vasishyeta somsmi aham. Prior to the cosmic creation, only I exist, and no phenomena exist, either gross, subtle, or primordial. After creation, only I exist in everything, and after annihilation, only I remain eternally. Aham means I. Therefore, the speaker who is saying aham, I, must have his own personality. The Mayavadi philosophers interpret this word, aham, as referring to the impersonal Brahman. The Mayavadis are very proud of their grammatical knowledge, but any person who has actual knowledge of grammar can understand that aham means I, and that I refers to a personality. Therefore, the personality of Godhead, speaking to Brahma, uses aham while describing his own transcendental form. Aham has a specific meaning. It is not a vague term that can be whimsically interpreted. Aham, when spoken by Krishna, refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and nothing else. Before the creation and after its dissolution, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his associates exist. There is no existence of the material elements. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature. Vasudeva va idam agra asin na brahma na cha shankara. The meaning of this mantra is that before creation there was no existence of Brahma or Shiva, for only Vishnu existed. Vishnu exists in his abode, the Vaikunthas. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, and on each of them Vishnu resides with his associates and his paraphernalia. It is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that although the creation is periodically dissolved, There is another abode which is never dissolved. The word creation refers to the material creation because in the spiritual world everything exists eternally and there is no creation or dissolution. The Lord indicates herein that before the material creation he existed in fullness with all transcendental opulence, including all strength, all wealth, all beauty, all knowledge, all fame, and all renunciation. If one thinks of a king, he automatically thinks of his secretaries, ministers, military commanders, palaces, and so on. Since a king has such opulences, one can simply try to imagine the opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the Lord says, Aham, therefore, it is to be understood that he exists with full potency, including all opulences. The word Yat refers to Brahman, the impersonal effulgence of the Lord. In the Brahma Samhita, it is said, Tad Brahman Nishkalam Anantam Asesha Bhutam. The Brahman effulgence expands unlimitedly, just as the Brahman effulgence expands unlimitedly, just as the sun is a localized planet with the sunshine expanding unlimitedly from that source. So the all absolute truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead with his effulgence of energy, Brahman, expanding unlimitedly. From that Brahman energy, the creation appears just as a cloud appears in sunshine. From the cloud comes rain. From the rain comes vegetation. And from the vegetation comes fruits and flowers, which are the basis of subsistence for many other forms of life. Similarly, the effulgent bodily luster of the Supreme Lord is the cause of the creation of infinite universes. The Brahman effulgence is impersonal, but the cause of that energy is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Aham is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. From him, in his abode, the Vaikunthas, this Brahma Jyoti emanates. He is never impersonal. Since impersonalists cannot understand the source of the Brahman energy, they mistakenly choose to think this impersonal Brahman, the ultimate or abandoned goal. Since impersonalists cannot understand the sources of the Brahman energy, they mistakenly choose to think this impersonal Brahman the ultimate or absolute goal. But as stated in the Upanishads, one has to penetrate the impersonal effulgence to see the form, but as stated in the Upanishads, one has to penetrate the impersonal effulgence to see the face of the Supreme Lord. If one desires to reach the source of the sunshine, he has to travel through the sunshine to reach the sun and then meet the predominating deity there. The absolute truth is the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, and Source. The absolute truth is the Supreme Person, Brahman, as Srimad Bhagavatam explains. Sat means effect, Asat means cause, and Param refers to the ultimate truth, which is transcendental to cause and effect. The cause of the creation is called the Mahatattva, or total material energy, and its effect is the creation itself. But neither cause nor effect existed in the beginning. They emanated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as did the energy of time. This is stated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadi Ashayataha. The source of birth is the cosmic manifestation or Mahatattva. The source of birth of the cosmic manifestation or Mahatattva is the personality of Godhead. This is confirmed throughout Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the fountainhead of all emanations. The material cosmos, being temporary, is sometimes manifested and sometimes unmanifest, but its energy emanates from the Supreme Absolute Lord. Before the creation, there was neither cause nor effect, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead existed with his full opulence and energy. The words paschadaham indicate that the Lord exists after the dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. When the material world is dissolved, the Lord still exists personally in the Vaikunthas. During the creation, the Lord also exists as he is in the Vaikunthas, and he also exists as the Supersoul within the material universes. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Goloka eva nivasati. Although he is perfectly and eternally present in Goloka Vrindaban, in Vaikuntha, he is nevertheless all-pervading, akilatma bhuta. The all-pervading feature of the Lord is called the Supersoul. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Aham Krishnasya Jagataha Prabhava. Aham Krishnasya Jagata Prabhava. The cosmic manifestation is a display of the energy of the Supreme Lord. The material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, display the inferior energy of the Lord, and the living entities are his superior energy. Since that energy of the Lord is not different from him, in fact, everything that exists is Krishna in his impersonal feature. Sunshine, sunlight, and heat are not different from the sun, and yet simultaneously they are distinct energies of the sun. Similarly, the cosmic manifestation and the living entities are energies of the Lord, and they are considered to be simultaneously one with and different from him. The Lord therefore says, I am everything, because everything is his energy and is therefore non-different from him. Yo vasishyeta somsmiyaham indicates that the Lord is the balance that exists after the dissolution of the creation. A spiritual manifestation never vanishes. It belongs to the internal energy of the Supreme Lord and exists eternally. When the external manifestation is withdrawn, the spiritual activities in Goloka and the rest of the Vaikunthas continue, unrestricted by material time, which has no existence in the spiritual world. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Yadgatva na nivartante taddhamma paramam mama. The abode from which no one returns to the material world is the spiritual abode of the Supreme Lord. The abode from which no one returns to this material world is the supreme abode of the Lord. Vritirtam yad pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tadvidyad atmano mayam yata baso yata tamaha. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. So the first of these four essential verses, Ahamivasha eva agre nanyad yat sadasat param paschadaham yad etatscha yo vasishyeta somsmiyaham. Prior to the cosmic creation, only I exist and no phenomena exist, either gross, subtle, or primordial. After creation, only I exist in everything, and after annihilation, only I remain eternally. So, as we heard here in the explanation, Aham refers to personality. The Lord is affirming his personal existence, and he's saying, before the creation I existed, during the creation I continue to exist, and after the annihilation of this material creation, I continue to exist. So what the Lord is saying is, his form, his personality, everything is not material. Before there was a material creation, Krishna existed. So he's not part of this creation. He's not part of Brahma's creation. He, in fact, instructed Brahma, giving him the word tapa. And Brahma understood that if he engaged himself in austerities, he could understand how to go about making the creation, that the Lord would give him the understanding and the intelligence. But Krishna is not part of Brahma's creation. Before the creation, Krishna exists. During the creation, he continues to exist. And after all the material elements are dissolved, Krishna also exists. So his existence is independent of the creation. He's not part of the creation, and he's rather the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhava. Okay. Now we're hearing the second of these verses, which is also a very nice verse here. Second verse of the four verses of the second canto. Ritertam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tad vidyad atmano mayam yatha baso yatha tamaha. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. In the previous verse, the absolute truth and its nature have been explained. One must also understand the relative truth to actually know the absolute. The relative truth, which is called Maya, or material nature, is explained here. Maya has no independent existence. One who is less intelligent is captivated by the wonderful activities of Maya, but he does not understand that behind these activities is the direction of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Maya yakshena prakriti suyache sa chara charam. The material nature is working and producing moving and non-moving beings only by the supervision of Krishna. The real nature of Maya, the illusory existence, is the material the real nature of Maya, the illusory existence of the material manifestation, is clearly explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. The absolute truth is substance, and relative truth depends upon its relationship with the absolute for its existence. Maya means energy. Therefore, the relative truth is explained to be the energy of the absolute truth. Since it is difficult to understand the distinction between the absolute and relative truths, an analogy can be given for clarification. The absolute truth can be compared to the sun, which is appreciated in terms of two relative truths, reflection and darkness. Darkness is the absence of sunshine, and a reflection is a projection of sunshine into darkness. Neither darkness nor reflection has an independent existence. Darkness comes when the sunshine is blocked. For example, if one stands facing the sun, his back will be in darkness. Since darkness stands in the absence of the sun, it is therefore relative to the sun. The spiritual world is compared to the real sunshine, and the material world is compared to the dark regions where the sun is not visible. When the material manifestation appears very wonderful, this is due to a perverted reflection of the supreme sunshine, the absolute truth, as confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Whatever one can see here has its substance in the absolute. As darkness is situated far away from the sun, so the material world is also far away from the spiritual world. The Vedic literature directs us not to be captivated by the dark regions, tamaha, but to try to reach the shining regions of the absolute, Jogidhamma. A spiritual world is brightly illuminated, but the material world is wrapped in darkness. In the material world, sunshine, moonshine, or different kinds of artificial light are required to dispel darkness, especially at night, for by nature the material world is dark. Therefore, the Supreme Lord has arranged for sunshine and moonshine, but in his abode, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, there is no necessity for lighting by sunshine, moonshine, or electricity, because everything is self-effulgent. That which is relative, temporary, and far away from the absolute truth is called Maya, or ignorance. The illusion is exhibited in two ways, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita. The inferior illusion is inert matter, and the superior illusion is the living entity. The living entities are called illusory in this context only because they are implicated in the illusory structures and activities of the material world. Actually, the living entities are not illusory, for they are parts of the superior energy of the Supreme Lord and do not have to be covered by Maya if they do not want to be so. The actions of the living entities in the spiritual kingdom are not illusory. They are the actual, eternal activities of the liberated souls. So this is this second of these four essential verses from the Chatu Sloki from the second canto. Retertam yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta chatmani tadvidyanatmano mayam yatabaso yatatamaha. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. So all truths are relative, and they're relative to the Supreme Lord. I remember when I was studying, when we referred to mathematics and geometry, we talked about axiomatic truths. Axioms, which are supposedly independently true. But here it says, what appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, because nothing can have an absolute reference without being referred to the Supreme Lord. So if you take an axiomatic truth, we can say an axiomatic truth would be something like the sun rises in the east. So for anywhere in this earth, it appears that the sun rises in the east. But that axiomatic truth that the sun rises in the east, that's relative, because the sun doesn't necessarily have to rise in the east everywhere in the universe or everywhere out of the universe. There may be planets that rotate or don't rotate or rotate in different ways. The sun doesn't necessarily have to rise in the east. And then if you go to the pole, like the most northern part, the North Pole, how the sun rises there, we'd have to see as the very. But here it says, what appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. Without the Lord, there is no sun, there is no moon, there is no reference to any of these things. They all are dependent on the Lord. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. Yata mahanti bhutani bhuteshu chavaseshvanu pravishtani apravishtani tatateshu nateshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. The gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, combine with the subtle material elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego, to construct the bodies of this material world, and yet they are beyond these bodies as well. Any material construction is nothing but an amalgamation or combination of material elements in varied proportions. These elements exist both within and beyond the body. For example, although the sky exists in space, it also enters within the body. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is the cause of the material energy, lives within the material world as well as beyond it. Without his presence within the material world, the cosmic body would not develop, just as without the presence of the spirit within the physical body, the body could not develop. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. The Personality of Godhead, in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma, enters every entity, from the biggest to the most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has the single qualifications of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization. Okay? The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization, by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person, as a man meets another man face to face. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. His eyes are engaged in seeing the beautiful couple, Sri Radha and Krishna, sitting on a decorated throne beneath a desire tree in the transcendental land of Vrindaban. His nose is engaged in smelling the spiritual aroma of the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, his ears are engaged in hearing messages from Vaikuntha, and his hands embrace the the lotus feet of the Lord and his associates. Thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of the devotional relationship in which a devotee and the Lord are bound by a tie of spontaneous love. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. Yata mahanti bhutani bhuteshu chavacheshvanu pravishtani apravishtani tatateshu nateshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj has commented that these verses describing the Lord, they appear to be, if we just hear them, I'm within every element, and yet I'm not within them. It appears to be almost, you could say, a form of madness. Because as stated here by the Lord to Brahma, these are all constitute mysterious mysteries which can only be understood by the devotees. Otherwise, how will you understand the Lord by his energies enters into all aspects of the creation, including the bodies of all living entities, yet all the elements, yet the Lord exists in one sense he is within every living entity by his energies, but in another sense he is not within them because he maintains his own individual existence apart from this material world. And this is what Mahaprabhu's philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva means, simultaneously one and different. So normally, as Srila Sridhar Maharaj has remarked, these mysteries are hard to understand by average persons. Without understanding the personality of the Lord, it all sounds like madness. But it is not, because it is, as Mahaprabhu has stated, it is all understood as being simultaneously one with and different.
Sí, pero aquí traduce, yo existo en todas las creaciones materiales y sin embargo no estoy en ellas.
Yes.
¿Ese es el mismo significado?
Yes. Yes. I'm because the Lord is present within every you can say the Lord has expanded himself. He's within every aspect of the creation, and yet he's not within them because he maintains his own apart, separate spiritual form as Krishna, enjoying his divine activities in the spiritual world. Okay. Now, one more verse of this Chatushloki. Etavadeva jigyasham tattva jigyasunatmanaha anvayam vyatirekabhyam yatshat sarvatra sarvada. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. Those who are serious about the knowledge of the transcendental world, which is far beyond the material cosmic creation, must approach a bona fide spiritual master to learn the science both directly and indirectly. One must learn both the means to approach the desired destination and the hindrances to such progress. The spiritual master knows how to regulate the habits of a neophyte disciple, and therefore a serious student must learn the science in all its aspects from him. There are different grades and standards of prosperity. The standard of comfort and happiness conceived by a common man engaged in material labor is the lowest grade of happiness, for it is in relationship with the body. The highest standard of such bodily comfort is achieved by a fruitive worker who by pious activities reaches the plane of heaven, or the kingdom of the creative gods with their delegated powers. But the conception of comfortable life in heaven is insignificant in comparison to the happiness enjoyed in the impersonal Brahman. And this Brahmananda, the spiritual bliss derived from impersonal Brahman, is like the water in the hooprin of a calf compared to the ocean of love of Godhead. When one develops pure love for the Lord, he derives an ocean of transcendental happiness from the association of the personality of Godhead. To qualify oneself to reach this stage of life is the highest perfection. One should try to purchase a ticket to go back home, back to Godhead. The price of such a ticket is one's intense desire for it, which is not easily awakened, even if one continuously performs pious activities for thousands of lives. All mundane relationships are sure to be broken in the course of time, but once one establishes a relationship with the personality of Godhead in a particular rasa, it is never to be broken even after the annihilation of the material world. One should understand through the transparent medium of the spiritual master that the Supreme Lord exists everywhere in his transcendental spiritual nature, and that the living entities' relationships with the Lord are directly and indirectly existing everywhere, even in this material world. In the spiritual world, there are 5 kinds of relationships with the Supreme Lord: Shanta, Dasha, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. The perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or in the neutral and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasha relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakya. The affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya, and the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are reestablished with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal blissful life. From this and the preceding 3 verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which have been selected from Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chatu Shloki, the missionary from this and the preceding verses of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which have been selected from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the missionary activities of Lord Chaitanya can be understood. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses, which are summarized in the 4 verses beginning with the Ham Eva Eva Gre and concluding with Yat Shat Sarvatra Sarvada. In the first of these verses, the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is explained. The second verse further explains that the Lord is detached from the workings of the material energy, Maya. The living entities, although parts and parcels of Lord Krishna, are prone to be controlled by the external energy. Therefore, although they are spiritual, in the material world they are encased in bodies of material energy. The eternal relationship of the living entities with the Supreme Lord is explained in that verse. The next verse instructs that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable energies, is simultaneously one with and different from the living entities and the material energy. This knowledge is called Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. When an individual living entity surrenders to the Supreme Lord Krishna, he can then develop natural transcendental love for him. This surrendering process should be the primary concern of a human being. In the next verse, It is said that a conditioned soul must ultimately approach a bona fide spiritual master and try to understand perfectly the material and spiritual worlds and his own existential position. Here the words Anvaya Vyatireka Bhyam, directly and indirectly, suggest that one must learn the process of devotional service in its two aspects. One must directly execute the process of devotional service and indirectly avoid the impediments to progress. Okay. Chintamanir Jayatis Somagirir Gurur Me Siksha Gurus Cha Bhagavan Shiki Pincha Moli Yatpara Kopataru Palava Shekareshu Lila Swayam Vara Rasam Labate Jayashri. All glories to Chintamani and my initiating spiritual master Somagiri. All glories to my instructing spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who wears peacock feathers in his crown. Under the shade of his lotus feet, which are like desire trees, Jayashri Radharani enjoys the transcendental mellow of an eternal consort. This verse is from the Krishna Karnamrita, which was written by a great Vaishnava sannyasi named Bilva Mangal Thakur, who was also known as Lila Shuka. He intensely desired to enter into the eternal pastimes of the Lord, and he lived at Vrindaban for 700 years in the vicinity of Brahmakund, a still existing bathing tank in Vrindaban. The history of Bilva Mangal Thakur is given in a book called Sri Vallabha Digvijay. He appeared in the 8th century of the Shaka era in the province of Dravida and was the chief disciple of Vishnu Swami. In a list of temples and monasteries kept in Shankaracharya's monastery in Dwarka, Bilva Mangal is mentioned as the founder of the Dwarkadish temple there. He entrusted the service of the deity to Hari Brahmacharya, disciple of Vallabha Bhatta. Bilva Mangal Thakur actually entered into the transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna. He has recorded his transcendental experiences and appreciation in the book known as Krishna Karnamrita. In the beginning of the book, he has offered his obeisances to his different gurus, and it is to be noted that he has adored them all equally. The first spiritual master mentioned is Chintamani, who is one of his instructing spiritual masters because she first showed him the spiritual path. Chintamani was a prostitute with whom Bilva Mangal was intimate earlier in his life. She gave him the inspiration to begin on the path of devotional service, and because she convinced him to give up material existence to try for perfection by loving Krishna, he has first offered his respects to her. Next, he offers his respects to his initiating spiritual master, Somagiri, and then to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was also his instructing spiritual master. He explicitly mentions Bhagavan, who has peacock feathers on his crown, because the Lord of Vrindaban, Krishna, the cowherd boy, used to come to Bilva Mangal to talk with him and supply him with milk. In his adoration of Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, he states that Jayashri, the goddess of fortune, Srimati Radharani, takes shelter in the shade of his lotus feet to enjoy the transcendental rasa of nuptial love. The complete treatise Krishna Karnamrita is dedicated to the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. The complete treatise Krishna Karnamrita is dedicated to the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna and Srimati Radharani. It is a book to be read and understood by the most elevated devotees of Sri Krishna. Okay. Jive shakat nahi tate guru chaitya rupe Shikaguru Hoy Krishna Mahanta Swarupe. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Krishna himself. Jivi shakat nahi tate guru chaitya rupe, shikaguru hoy Krishna mahanta swarupe. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Krishna himself. It is not possible for a conditioned soul to directly meet Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but if one becomes a sincere devotee and seriously engages in devotional service, Lord Krishna sends an instructing spiritual master to show him favor and invoke his dormant propensity for serving the Supreme. The preceptor appears before the external senses of the fortunate conditioned soul, and at the same time, the devotee is guided from within by the Chaitya Guru, Krishna, who is seated as the spiritual master within the heart of the living entity. It's very hard that the conditioned soul will make contact with the Chaitya Guru, with the Lord within, or be able to hear. We can perceive that. Sometimes one goes to different countries and one is not able to receive transmissions such as radio or internet, etc., because the airwaves are jammed, or they're not being, things are not entering. The country may control the airwaves. They don't want certain channels to be received by people. Well, due to our material existence and our material mind and senses, we cannot perceive what the Chaitya Guru from within is actually instructing us. All the means of transmission are being jammed by our material consciousness. Therefore, it is essential that one will receive instructions from without by the spiritual master, and his instructions also enter within, but he is instructing us. We can see him, we can hear him, we can make contact with him, and that way we can be understood. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Krishna himself. Tata du sangam utsrija satsu sajeta buddhiman sanda evasya chindanti mano vyasangam uktibi. One should therefore avoid bad company and associate only with devotees. With their realized instructions, such saints can cut the knot connecting one with activities unfavorable to devotional service. This verse, which appears in Srimad Bhagavatam, was spoken by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the text known as the Uddhava Gita. The discussion relates to the story of Pururava, and the heavenly courtesan Urvashi. When Urvashi left Pururava, he was deeply affected by the separation and had to learn to overcome his grief. It is indicated that to learn the transcendental science, it is imperative that one avoid the company of undesirable persons and always seek the company of saints and sages, which are able to impart lessons of transcendental knowledge. The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart, thereby eradicating all misgivings and The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart, thereby eradicating all misgivings accumulated through years of undesirable association. For a neophyte devotee, there are two kinds of persons whose association is undesirable. One, gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification, and two, unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of their speculative habits. Intelligent persons seeking transcendental realization should very scrupulously avoid their company. One, gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification, and two, unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of their speculative habits. Intelligent persons seeking transcendental realization should very scrupulously avoid their company. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti ritkarna rasayana kata tajjoshanad ashvapavarga vartmani shradaratir bhaktir anukramishyati. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees and is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens, and gradually one attains firm faith that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. This verse appears in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Kapila Dev replies to the questions of his mother Devahuti about the process of devotional service. As one advances in devotional activities, the process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. Unless one gets this spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. Initially, one must develop confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master. Then, as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by the execution of devotional service. Strong attachment for the transcendental service of the Lord develops as he continues listening to the messages of Godhead. And if he steadfastly proceeds in this way, he is certainly elevated to spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So at this point I'm going to stop here. This is very nice. We heard the 4 essential verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam called the Chatushloki, which were instructed by Krishna to the Supreme Lord Brahma. And what's it? Srimad Bhagavatam begins with that verse. How's that verse start? Tane Brahma yad adikavaye muyanti yat suraya. Like this. I'm trying to remember the verse. Tane Brahma ya adikavaye muyanti yat suraya. Okay, let me just get the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the first verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadi Ashaya Tonvayad Itaratas Chartish Vigya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadi Ashaya Tonvayad Itaratas Chartish vabhigya svarat tene brahmarida ya arekavaye muyanti yat suraya tejo varimridam yata vinimayo yatra trisargom risha damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam bharam dhimai. This verse mentions, O my Lord, Sri Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. And there it says, Tene Brahma Ridaya Adikavaye Muyanti, that he instructed Lord Brahma. So in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 4 essential verses in which Krishna is enlightening Brahma, as it's mentioned here in the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So those, here in this second chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, these Chatu Shloki, or essential verses, which Krishna spoke to Brahma to enlighten him, are given, and they've been explained very nicely in the purport. And those verses we read today are Ham evasam evagre nanyad yat sadasat param paschadaham yad etatscha yo vasishyeta somsmiyaham. Prior to the cosmic creation, only I exist, and no phenomena exist, either gross, subtle, or primordial. After creation, only I exist in everything, and after annihilation, only I remain eternally. You know, Krishna is existing before the creation. He's not part of the creation. He's not a created living entity. He existed before, during, and after before the creation and before the before the destruction, annihilation, before the annihilation of the material creation. And then the second verse, Ritertam yat pratiyeta chatmani tadvidyadatmano mayam yatabaso yatatamaha. What appears to be truth without me is certainly my illusory energy, for nothing can exist without me. It is like a reflection of a real light in the shadows, for in the light there are neither shadows nor reflections. Then what follows is actually the 4th of the Chatu Shloki. And then after that is the 3rd of the Chatu Shloki. So this is the 4th of the Chatu Shloki, but it's quoted here as it's mentioned here after the 2nd, which is Yata Mahanti Bhutani Bhuteshu Chavacheshvanu Pravishtani Apravishtani Tatateshu Nateshvaham. As the material elements enter the bodies of all living beings and yet remain outside them all, I exist within all material creations and yet am not within them. That can be understood by Mahaprabhu's philosophy of the Chintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. The Lord enters into all the material creation, and yet he is not within it. He maintains his own separate existence. Then the other verse of the Chatushloki, actually the third of the Chatushloki here mentioned after the fourth, but this is Etava deva jigyasham tattva jigyasunatmana anvayam yati rekabhyam yatshat sarvatra sarvada. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. A person interested in transcendental knowledge must therefore always directly and indirectly inquire about it to know the all-pervading truth. So tomorrow we'll continue with our reading here from the first chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, entitled The Spiritual Masters.
Maharaj, I think this was mentioned, but to indirectly inquire, is that like Seva and stuff like that? Or?
Directly and indirectly inquiring. And everything you do and inquire will be related to understanding the nature of devotional service or the relationship with the Lord. So in order to, you may, in this world, pursue so many different paths, but those paths should be all seen in relationship with the Lord. For instance, within the scope of devotional service, one may have to pursue some more means of existence, support, knowledge, etc., within this material world in order to be able to live and function. But that's indirectly related with the Supreme Lord also, because our existence is not independent of Him. We're doing everything ultimately so that we can continue with His service. So, Hariharaya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinatha Madan-Mohan Giridhari Gopinatha Madan-Mohan Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta Jai Rupa Sanatam Bhatta Raghunath Jai Rupa Sanatam Bhatta Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan Jao ite vignana shamista puran Jao ite vignana shamista puran H.I. Gosai Jar Mui Taradas H.I. Gosai Jar Mui Taradas Kasabar Bhara Renu Mora Panchagras Kasabar Bhara Renu Mora Panchagras Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas Janame Janame More Abhilas Janame Janame More Abhilas H.I. Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas H.I. Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas Radha Krishna Nitya-lila Korila Prakash Radha Krishna Nitya-lila Korila Prakash Anande bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Anande bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamuda. Nam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamuda. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamadas. Nam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamadas. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai Saparikara Shishi Guru Guranga Gandharvika Giridhari Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parabhajaka Charyashtatara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Nirmamacharya Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parabhajaka Charya Ashtatara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramansa Parabhajaka Charya Ashtatara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Rakshidhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivedanta Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Rupanuga Guru Bharga Ki Jai. Namachari Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dasha Raghunath, Shad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Premsigo Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Harshivasadi, Shri Gauda Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Vishvavarenya Srila Jai, Srila Vrindaban Das Thakur Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Bhagwat Ki Jai, Jai Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai, Srinivas Shamananda Jai, Jai Narottam Srinivas Shamananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Jai Vishvavarenya Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupad Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Kushamashram Maharaj ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Shri Namadip Dham ki jai, Shri Ram Mayapur ki jai, Saparshada Shri Nityananda Prabhu ki jai, Saparshada Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Koladvip ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat ki jai, Soquel Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Sevashram ki jai, Ganga Devi ki jai, Tulasi Maharani ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Sri Vrindaban ki jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Govardhan Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Kalindi Munajo ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, all the assembled devotees ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Jai Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Pavan Janardan Maharaj ki jai.